Hey there, it's Dan and you're watching the Salty Sea. With so many warbands in Warcry, and so little time to take each one out for a spin, I thought I'd give some mini guides for three of my favorite warbands that I might not ever get my hands on to play enough for a full faction rundown. The Unmade, Nighthaunt, and Ogor Mawtribes are some of the sweetest factions in the game, so I'm going to give you some quick hits on unit stats and how to play them, before giving you my thoughts on what I hope they get out of the upcoming Grand Alliance books. With the new tomes coming soon to Warcry, a lot of factions are going to see some major changes, but the leaks so far have shown they aren't really taking anything away. So while now might not be a safe time to release a full deep dive on one faction, I feel pretty safe giving these general overviews, and I've chosen three crews that aren't too likely to see any major paradigm shifts due to new models. So let's get into it. The Unmade. How cool is this concept? We never get to see what the living folks in the realm of death look like. It's just so rare in the game that we see chaos corrupt anything but order. Here we get to see what it looks like when actual living humans in the realm of death start unknowingly falling to Slaanesh instead of their Lord Nagash. So let's take a look at their units. Now their leader's great. I started sort of putting a test in my head for big units, things that cost more than 200 points. They really need to be able to one-hit KO chaff units. If they can't, then the activation disadvantage they face just gets too big. Then they need to either be fast or fast to choose their fights, or just really hard to kill so they don't care about being surrounded. The blissful one is made out of glass, but it definitely checks off the other two boxes, so we have a winner here. Now as far as the awakened ones go, the sort of chaff units, the flail is just better in every way. I've seen some folks on Reddit and Facebook advocate spears, so as quick as I can, just let me explain. The spear does just a tiny sliver more damage than the ranged option on the flails, but at 2-inch range instead of 3. And the melee flail has a much more noticeable damage improvement over the spear when it's right base to base with something. So if you want to be tricksy and attack without them attacking you back, the flail actually gives you more options. And if you want more damage, the flail is also the better option. So even though the spear does have one tiny edge case where it's better, when we're talking about battlefield roles, the flail wins on both fronts, and it gives you the flexibility to choose which one you want to do. It's too bad the box doesn't come with the maximum number of them. Now to just talk joyous versus ascended ones, both have a unique ability, and both abilities are bad. The joyous one does a little bit better job at being a mini leader thanks to the extra mobility and 5 HP, but the damage isn't actually any better at 20 extra points, so don't sweat the difference too much, just take whatever is going to fit in your list. Now as far as the abilities go, two of your doubles are really nice because they can be used by any fighter, and they kind of go along the same lines. Nightmarish Visage, say that 5 times fast, is great because it locks down the movement of an enemy unit on 3+, so it's best when you prevent their heaviest hitter from fighting anything this round. You want to be able to reach their elite and cast this on your first activation of the round, so double move straight towards it, but stay out of range. And that'll help protect your leader. Now, Barbed Strike also supports the leader because it reduces the toughness on a unit if you score a hit. So the attack profiles, if you noticed in the previous slide, they tend to degrade really fast against armor. So lowering toughness actually matters here, even though it's generally the least important stat in the game. This ability is worse than Onslaught for one unit, but if you're going to get a follow-up attack afterwards, it does end up catching up to Onslaught in terms of damage. Now as far as the triple goes, the best one is Vessel of Torment. A lot of warbands have this triple, but the leader of this one uses it way better than most. 1, because it actually does real damage, and 2, because it's really fast. So having a move and then an attack after you get a kill, you're more likely to get kills, and then that move means more. So when you actually play this warband out of the box, it's going to be all about the leader combos. Your doubles either protect the leader or soften targets for the leader. And you're going to want to use your wild dice for a full house so that you can use one double to do one of those two things. And then you get to use the triple to make sure your leader does maximum carnage. It's a super high skill cap warband. Setting up these combos and baiting your opponent is going to take some galaxy brain plays. It's a Johnny Spike warband for sure. Now what if you get 2 boxes? I think the warband gets a lot better. The mid-sized units, the Joyous and the Ascended one, are just kind of blah, so getting 2 boxes lets you shrink down to just 2 of them. I like having 2 Joyous ones, not because they're that much better point for point, but with 60-point Awakened ones, the math just works out better this way. They make a nice backup plan if you screw up and get your leader killed. So sorry, Ascendeds. The good abilities are universal to the warband, so the elites don't matter. Just flood the board with Awakened ones and protect the leader. Now if I'm wishlisting for the Unmade, the GA books, according to the leaks, they've been about expanding the role of leaders, but this warband already has a great leader, so there's no real need for a new one. Replacing it with other options wouldn't actually make the warband any better. So instead, it might be nice to see an upgrade or two to the abilities in the faction, maybe rework some of them. The mid-sized units in Unmade really aren't good, and I think part of the reason for that is that the abilities aren't useful. So it'd be really nice to see them sort of adjust those. The other thing is the quad. It's very flavorful, but not very good in such a fragile warband. It requires you to take damage before you get the real bonus out of it, but damage is likely to kill your fighters because they're all made of glass. They have no armor on. So replacing it with something more on theme would be better. So let's get on to Nighthaunt. The range for the Ghosty Boys is just incredible. Look at the dynamism in some of these sculpts. The moving robes, the sense of floating movement. It goes all the way from the heroes down to just the foot soldiers. They all have that movement to them. You also have 2 different aesthetics that fit together really nicely here. Between the sort of Mexican Day of the Dead Katrina look of the Harridans and the Banshees and Olinder, and then you have the sort of medieval Shakespearean horror look of the other troops. I never would have thought they'd pair together well, but it actually works. Unfortunately, going through the units, it just feels like every unit other than the Spirit Hosts is just overcosted by maybe just 5 points or so. I don't know if it's Games Workshop maybe overvaluing the combo of flying and high toughness. Probably the toughness, because I find they generally overvalue that stat across the board. But still, there are some ways to maximize the sort of quirkiness of this warband. For example, some warbands, like the Unmade that we just went over, have their damage profiles degrade really quickly against toughness 5, and they wouldn't be able to deal with the armor on the haunts. So, if you're looking to create even games, that can be one way to do it with these guys. Also, they have pretty good speed, but nothing special. But that combined with fly means that if you play on really high terrain boards, you can actually use the terrain to outmaneuver the opponent and win on objectives really nicely. So you're going to want to, if you play this warband, build up a ton of terrain on your boards so that you can leverage the flying. Now, as far as quality of individual units go, the Spirit Hosts are legitimately good. They're very tanky, even for a 220-point unit, which you can really use to your advantage. Now on the abilities, Chilling Horde, it's been errated, so it's not exactly the same as it is on the card. It gives you sort of Onslaught, but with +1 strength. It only works on Chain Rasps and the Chain Rasp leader when they're close together. And it only is better than Onslaught against specifically Toughness 4. So it's not a big deal, but it's just nice to have. Now I only want to mention Soulmarked Prey quickly, because it's a nice combo between the Grimghast Reapers and the Spirit Host. It only hurts 1 target unit, so I think the investment is a bit high for the payoff, but it's definitely worth pairing them once or twice if you happen to own the whole roster. Now we get onto the triples, which are both really strong for this warband, which is nice because most warbands' triples aren't very good. Now, Frightful Touch buffs the Spirit Host's damage output by 60%, which is incredible because Onslaught, the universal double damage buffer, only buffs their damage by 17%. Then, Spectral Summons lets you res any fighter near the leader. They come back with barely any health, but who cares? The extra activations are what's important, and you can do it on big fighters too. So if you're going to bring Nighthaunt to the board, there's a couple different ways to play him. The first is to try and maximize the impact of resurrecting one model. You're going to want to charge forward with Spirit Hosts, force the issue, make the opponent double, triple team them right away, and then hopefully res one in round 2 to use again in round 3. Here you're going to want to have the Extoller, the bigger of the two leaders, because he's a little bit tougher to kill, which is going to make it harder for the opponent to blow up your plan. The second way to try to play them is to try to leverage their mobility. Nighthaunt aren't very good in a fight, but ignoring terrain and all of them moving pretty well can be really nice. If you want to just only fight one fight, just pick one, and get your whole warband onto the one fight that matters, and then just try to win a game where all of your opponent's not target units are just sitting around unfought, but you just won the one that matters. So here we're putting a couple Banshees in there because they're fragile, but they do have move 6 and pretty respectable damage. Your Chain Rasps are all going to be in one blob, which guarantees that you get the upgraded Onslaught on your leader. Now, most of your team is going to end up dying by the end of your game, but as long as you win the fight at the objective, that's that. In either style, you're going to need to leverage terrain and play keep away with your important units. You can't let your leader die on style 1, and you need your Banshees to get into the fight that matters. Now, as far as wishlisting for the new books, there's a ton to work with in Nighthaunt. The first is the Dreadblade Harrows or the Mounted Knight of Shrouds. Currently, Nighthaunt doesn't have any super fast unit that does really good damage. All of their units are just faster than average with low damage. So having a sort of dragon type of unit, a fast hammer, would be really nice. Warcry is sort of a haves and have-nots game about two different unit types. One is mobile chaff and one is these dragon units. So that would be great for them. I don't think it's healthy to give every warband the same tools. I'd like them to make some warbands better at different things. But if you're purely a Nighthaunt cheerleader, definitely root for them to get some fast flying beatdown machines. On the other hand, if Nighthaunt is supposed to be a sort of mid-mobility, high-defense attrition army, then let's just have them double down on that. They've got a few different units that are just regular foot soldier units that aren't in the game yet, Dread Scythe Herodents and Bladegeist Revenants. It'd be really nice to have them put those into the game and have them be really effective. Then just put some of the floaty heroes into the game that are already in the Monsters and Mercenaries book. Hopefully they don't get nerfed too much, like we've seen a lot of the mercenaries in the leagues get nerfed, and keep their power high to help out this warband that's somewhat on the lower tier. Executioners and Tomb Banshees especially, I think, would be really great to have. Now let's get on to the ogres. I just love the culture that's grown up around ogres online. I think it's hilarious. They're r/Sigmarxism's favorite faction, they're the fave faction of multiple AOS YouTubers, and it has everything to do with their badass attitude, and surely nothing to do with wargamers seeing a bit of ourselves in the big old belly boys. So right away, looking at their stats, a couple things jump out. First of all, they are really slow. But second of all, they win their fights. They have a ton of high damage options, and every single ogre is really hard to kill. Remember when I mentioned the big unit test over on the Unmade? They should be able to one-shot chaff models and then either be fast or hard to kill. Well, these guys aren't fast, but they definitely pass the test. Seriously, the only bad options they have in the whole roster would be great in a lot of other warbands, and only stink here because the Glutton with 2 weapons for 205 points is just better than the other melee soldiers. And look at those two melee leaders. The Gutlord is Warcry's king of crunching up Stormcast Eternals, and the Bellower does even dumber damage. Even the Noblars are about as good a unit as anything with 4 movement can possibly be. Their stats are insane for 45 points. Quick side note, I think GW has a major flaw in their pointing algorithm at low numbers. A Noblar's stats are a bit worse than a Savage Oryx out of Bone Splitters, but the 40-point drop between the two points-wise totally changes what you can do with them. Every unit in the game below 60 points is insane, bar none. There are literally no exceptions to this rule. Anyway, rant over. Mobility is going to be a pretty big problem for this warband, but you do have some abilities to make up for it. The first is On the Maw path. It's incredibly important in round 1, and it's worth using wild dice to have 2 doubles to use this on multiple models in round 1, so that you can get more of your big guys into the right places. Then you've got Might Makes Right. It lets you either attack again or move once after one of your leaders has gotten a kill. And it's decent for getting around for all of the leader options, but it's best for the Thunder Fist. Normally ranged units are shooting and not moving, so they end up not playing the objectives. But with this you can double shoot, finish something off, and then also get to move once, which is really nice. Then your Noblars also have a pretty good ability for objective games, where with Sneaky Traps, you can sort of rush one to double move onto an objective at the beginning of a round, and then from then on for the rest of the round, any unit that needs to come up and take the Noblar off the objective is just going to take some damage. So it's going to give you a lot of free value, potentially, in some games. Finally, their quad is just ridiculous on a 5 or a 6. Even on a 1 or a 2, it can make your Lead Belchers able to delete a Stormcast Eternal off the board in just 1 round of shooting. This plus Might Makes Right together make the Thunder Fist an incredibly attractive leader option for the warband. So let's get into how they end up playing. The playstyle should be bring some big guys and just beat down. But if you're trying to play Ogres competitively in Warcry, you're going to want at least 6 Noblars, which I think is kind of too bad, but it is what it is in the game, and you still get to take a few big guys. In addition, I think the abilities just open up better play patterns for the Lead Belcher leader than they do for the other 2, even though the other 2 are perfectly respectable. This competitive list manages to take 3 giant monsters while still keeping a healthy unit count at 10 models because of the 7 Noblars you get for just 315 points. But really, don't you just want to bash? Let's get a Bellower in here. Screw Noblars. We just need one of them to carry our stuff. Let's run 4 giant murdering ogres and just dare our opponents to fight us head on. So if I could have any one thing for Ogor Mawtribes in the GA books, what would it be? Well, the Gutlord and Bellower already do what a Tyrant would do. They're incredible melee monsters. So the thing I'm really excited to get into this warband is the Firebelly. It's totally unique in the Ogor Mawtribes range, and I think it would be really cool to have it in this warband. Most Warcry wizards are terrible, just completely unplayable in the game, so really hoping that they put this one with some abilities or maybe some stats that make it something you actually want to show up with. The other fun thing could be some man-eaters, because every man-eater sculpture is so completely different that it'd be kind of fun if they just made everyone do different things. That would be a ton of scrolls, but you know, the Destruction Tome is already going to be smaller than the others, so why not just put some more stuff in there? So there you have it. Some quick hits for some of the sweetest factions in the game. Let me know if you play one of these in the comments and how it's going for you. I'll be back with some more Warcry content soon, and maybe even some stuff for some other games. So until then, may all your rolls be crits.